I hope you found some sleep last night. You ready for a story? All right. So this story takes place in November of 1950. The 1st and 2nd Battalions of the United States Infantry. I can't find exactly which division. But anyway, so here's the scene. It's 1950. It's relatively early in the Korean War, and Father Kapaun is a chaplain with a division of infantry, American infantry, and they're pushing pretty far into North Korea. And a lot of people are thinking that they're going to whip North Korea's butt pretty quick, right? I mean, it's pretty classic. So they're in this area of a valley called the Namyeon River, all right? And the powers that be sent them into a valley and kind of spread them out real thin. And they were surrounded inside this valley by these cliffs on all sides. And you know Joe on the ground is just like, what in the hell are we doing here? This is like the worst possible place we could be. But fortunately, they were told by General Douglas MacArthur and the High Command that the communists and the North Koreans, they weren't really committed to the fight, and even though they were in a terrible position, there was nothing to worry about. Well, wouldn't you know it? Wouldn't you know it? That turned out not to be the case. So, what happened was, 2nd and 3rd Division are cut off from 1st Division, okay? Father Kapaun jumps in a Jeep, drives to the front where 1st Division is just getting annihilated. I mean, they are surrounded on all sides. The Chinese have decided to support the North Koreans, so they're pouring over the border by the thousands. So 1st Division is cut off from the main body. They're surrounded by 20,000 North Koreans and communists, Chinese communists, and they're just getting destroyed. They're getting absolutely smoked. Father Kapaun drives into that region, jumps out of his Jeep, and basically just goes into the foxholes with soldiers wearing these helmets. This is the World War II style helmet. Where this might even be a helmet from the Korean War. I'm not sure. He drives he drives right in there, and he starts helping out in the retreat. All right, so he's picking soldiers up. He's putting them back on the Jeep. He's trying to get them to the rear. They end up getting cut off in this kind of ditch area. There's a lot of them. Once they surrendered, I think there was over 1,000. I mean, it was a bad scene. So the Chinese have essentially surrounded the American soldiers. Father Kapaun is with the American soldiers, and he is supporting this surrender. Well, after the fighting has basically died down, what the Chinese soldiers are doing is they're going around. There's nothing in particularly barbaric or special or unique about this. This is just what happens. The Chinese soldiers are going around because they've got to march the prisoners of war out of this area. They're going around and they're shooting anybody that's severely wounded, right? Because they've got to walk. So if you're severely wounded, you just got to die anyway, slow it up. So they're going around and they're shooting those severely injured. Well, what has happened is, because this is going on, there are little chunks of GIs that are fighting back, even though they're hopelessly surrounded. And Father Kapaun is putting himself in the mix with the Chinese officers, trying to get them to recognize that if they let him talk to these soldiers, he'll get them to peacefully surrender. So Father Kapaun gets these groups of soldiers to surrender to the Chinese. It's hopeless. They throw up their arms, they throw down their weapons. Well, this one guy is a sergeant named Herb Miller, okay? Now, Herb was a soldier who was fought during World War II during the Battle of Normandy. He stormed the beach. So Herb is a straight up United States Army sergeant. I mean, this guy, just thinking about him makes my heart swell. It makes me want to just cry. So Herb is the kind of guy that, is just the toughest American soldier you've ever seen in your life. His ankle is blown to smithereens. He's got barely any foot left. And so what is a Chinese soldier doing? And again, I don't want to put any kind of negative vibes into the Chinese soldier. This is just what soldiers do, and I just have to say Chinese soldier because that's one side and we're the Americans on the other side. I mean no disrespect, and I mean no judgment about this. So the Chinese soldier, following orders, walks up to Herb, puts his gun to Herb's head, and is about to blow Herb's head off. Father Kapaun is with all the GIs who are probably standing there like this, right? They're probably standing on the road like this, waiting to go. They're surrounded, they're hopeless, they're fucked. Father Kapaun apparently is standing like this, sees what's going on with this Chinese soldier, and Herb just walks out of the line, walks past the guards, and just kind of gently pushes the rifle out of the way. And he doesn't speak Chinese. He pushes the rifle out of the way, and all the Chinese guards and the Korean guards are just kind of they're stunned, they're stupefied. And he just pushes that out of the way, and he picks Herb up. And the story will stop here, but he ends up carrying Herb on essentially a death march for days and days and days and days through the winter. Remember, it was November, right? Through the winter in North Korea to the POW camp. And I'll stop the story right there. But think about that, okay? You've just gotten smoked because you were put in a bad position. You had no idea that there were going to be 20,000 Chinese communist soldiers storming over the border and into this valley. Your leadership tells you it's not a big deal. You get just destroyed, okay? You got this priest who's a chaplain who's basically putting himself where the situation is the most deadly, helping soldiers navigate the retreat and then navigate their surrender. And then, while they're lined up, being marched, about to go on this death march, there's this guy who just out of nowhere just kind of breaks out of the line, walks past guards that, you got to imagine, these are as tense a moments as you can possibly have. You've got soldiers who just fought their guts out, and now they have to surrender. You've got these other soldiers who beat them, so they're all revved up. You've got everybody in their highest levels of threat, highest levels of fear. You've got predatorial behavior. You've got prey behavior. You've got all of this going on in this moment. And this one guy just walks in front of all this, walks straight up to a guard who literally has the right to shoot any soldier he wants, and just pushes the muzzle out of the way. Just pushes it out of the way. And they don't do anything about it. They don't beat him up. They don't kill him right there on the spot. This soldier who's about to kill this surrendered soldier, this definitely terribly wounded soldier, has probably killed, 5, 10, 20. I have no way of knowing. He's probably killed a bunch of soldiers up to this point. So he is in a place in his brain It's just a different place. Not to make an excuse, but it just is. It's just a different place. Father Kapaun walks right up to him and pushes his weapon down. How in the world can you explain that? Well, the Catholic Church and the United States government and all these other organizations explain this as the highest levels of valor. Well, the United States government gave him a Medal of Honor, posthumously awarded him the Medal of Honor. The Catholic Church is on its way, possibly, to making him a saint. How do you explain that? Well, we give it medals. We call it sainthood. But to me, what really stands out is the notion of fully open-heartedness. Now think about this. As the story goes on, Father Kapaun regularly talks to the soldiers he's in the POW camp with about forgiving the guards. And he is constantly doing things for others. So in my mind, what this represents is what open-heartedness does. It is the space of selflessness. So the selflessness is simply being completely without your own fear. And I don't mean you're not afraid. I just mean that your identity isn't engaged with this fear that you're feeling. It's there. I'm certain Father Kapaun felt fear. But what he probably felt more of was love. What he probably felt more of was love. And when you think about love, maybe you think of a heart emoji or something like that. But when you think about love in action, open-heartedness, then you got to think about this calm or this stability or this groundedness that is unperturbed, undisrupted, bigger than, brighter than, more stable than anything else. And so using that, he just walked. And there's so much to be said for what that probably looked like to the soldier. I mean, it's kind of like the phrase, beauty soothed the savage beast, right? Like there's just this direct connection. There's this innocence. There's this, it's just this innocence, this willingness to be vulnerable, that is so powerful that it breaks through all of our structures. I mean, I mentioned the brain before, but if you get into this kind of like predator prey, fight or flight, survival mode, there's no rational mind, right? That's gone. You're just in this survival mode. What breaks through all that? The heart. And so, in my mind, that's what God represents. God represents that ability. It's the light that breaks through all things. It's love. And so, I'll shift this now to the topic of the fourth bell. When we practice and we get to fourth bell, okay, what we're doing in first bell, second bell, and third bell are essentially breaking through in a systematic way the structures that are capable of putting us into a kind of a lesser state, right? It is good that we have a fight or flight process, fight or flight structure within us, but it's not where you live your life. It's good that we have a body that can be flushed with adrenaline and full of endorphins and be ready to move and activate and get all ready and revved up, but it's not where you want to live. It's good that our breath can be automated and we can breathe this way and that way, and we can just activate our breath, and our breath does all this stuff on the background. But it's not where we want to live. We live in a quiet breath. We live in a quiet breath. And we do these things to get to what living is all about. which is love. And I think love is the place that we all can talk about. But I think there's an aspect to love that is bigger than our understanding of what love is. And I think it's divine, and I think, and I believe, and this is how I live my life, that my relationship to God is my relationship to love. So if I think about God, I think about God's love for me, and I think about God's love within me. And if I think about selflessness or open-heartedness, then I'm not interacting with God's love as myself. I'm interacting with God's love as God's love. And it's not that, and we're going to go into training after this, it's not that Father Kapaun created the love that was able to essentially stymie every aspect of the position he was in and just move in. It was that Father Kapaun was a selfless individual, completely selfless, and because he was selfless, he was full of God. Full of God. He was full of God's love. It wasn't Father Kapaun's love that he was moving with. It was God's love. Father Kapaun had completely moved away from his self, his individual self, and filled with God's love, he stopped that guard and saved Sergeant Herb's life. And that story is just, it's awesome. And that's why we practice, right? We're not getting to fourth bell because it's a biologically valuable thing. We're not getting to fourth bell just because it's a physiological thing or a psychological thing. We're getting to fourth bell to basically armor down to open our hearts. And it's not just that we're opening our hearts and it's our love, like you own it. It's you're opening the thing that gives you access to whatever you want to call it, but what I call it is God's love. And God's love is love. Not your love, it's not my love, it's God's love. And so when you open your heart and you move into that space, you're bringing God's love into your heart. And so today, when we do our bells, think about that when you get to fourth bell, and think about it in first bell, okay, let your thoughts settle. Be with second bell, let your body settle. Be with third bell, let your breath settle. And then when you get to fourth bell, just be selfless. Be as open as you can, and imagine that your thoughts are animated by God's love inside of you, or just love in general, whatever word you choose to call it. And whatever that animating expression does, and how it shows up in your thoughts, imagine that not as yours, but as something we all share, which is love. So, let's get into the bells. Give you a second to get squared away here. Find 2 to 5% more comfort. Let's go bell 1. What shows up in your senses right around you? Is it sound? Light and shadow? Maybe smell? Maybe there's something that's showing up around you that is unique. For me, it's the sound of the space heater. It's got a new wobble to it. So I'm going to zoom in with my sense of sound exclusively on that wobble and just notice the pattern of it. where you're taming your mind with your first bell in the present moment, bringing your mind into the present moment. Now the wobble disappeared, so I'm going to expand out and just notice the quiet. Now temperature just showed up. There's an area of my left leg that's not covered by a blanket that's cooler than the rest of my body. Let's go bell 2. Now take your focus into the body, noticing the ground, what's beneath you. From there, notice the hip region, pelvis region, base of the spine region. Feel free to make little shifts and movements, just connecting to sensation at that spot. From there, come up to the core region. Now you're looking for comfort and ease, but there's an opportunity to interact too. So I've been doing more core work in my own fitness practice, and what I've noticed is there's some opportunities to kind of collect all of my core muscles, which kind of feels good, and then kind of let them out. Now you're looking for a balanced middle, where there's not too much pressure, there's not too much looseness, there's just a sense of collectedness, calmness, stableness. Find that for yourself and then move up. From there, heart space. And again, there's an opportunity to play a little bit. So maybe there's a big lift in the heart, like if you're yogi, it's up dog. Maybe there's a rounded back, cat-cow type stuff. Just finding your middle, your balance. Throat space, jaw, collarbone. It's kind of region of the space between your skull and your torso. Top of the head, hack the vagus nerve, soften the face. Soften the eyes, soften the chin, soften the cheeks. And throw a little smile on there. Third bell. So we're going to practice 4, 7, 8 breathing. So what this does is it really slows down your breathing. So you practice breathing in for 4 seconds, holding at the top for 7 seconds, and exhaling super slow for 8 seconds. What you want to create is you want to create a slower breath pattern. They say, based on a study of all the great religions and their different practices, whether it's rosaries, whether it's mantras, whether it's chanting, the breath rate when they do these practices, and this is pretty across the board, is about 5.5 breaths per minute. And so when we do 4, 7, 8, we're really slowing our breath down, and this kind of is the optimum breath rate according to science for the calmest internal environment you can create. So let's do 4, 7, 8. We're going to do it 6 times, right? That's going to put us at about 90 seconds. 6 times, and just reinforce this kind of system-wide calmness with the breath. So when you're ready, 4, 7, 8 breaths, 6 rounds. A couple more seconds before we move on to 4th bell. So go ahead and put your hands however you want them. Start with gratitude. What are you grateful for? Maybe just go straight to the story. Maybe start at the story. When you've kind of cultivated this love inside of you in the form of gratitude, consider giving it away through compassion. So I like to switch my hands to this way. So I go from here, this kind of grounding into the gratitude within, and then here, which is kind of pointing out with the expressions of compassion. So from here, compassion begins with suffering. So acknowledging the suffering and then sharing your love, sharing your goodwill with those that are suffering. Maybe it's an individual, maybe it's a group of people, maybe it's a country, maybe it's animals. It's entirely up to you. Maybe it's the planet, but give that love away. It's not yours to begin with, so give it away. be intentional. Be intentional when you finish by taking 2 breaths, and on the second exhale, you finish the practice. Reading about Father Kapaun has been really cool. He's awesome. Totally awesome. And the Catholics believe that the saints can intercede with God on your behalf. So if that's part of your practice, to pray, and to pray as though God is listening. You can pray to Father Kapaun, and he is an expression of God's love in human form. And so, if that's something that you'd like to do, by all means. So with that, today is done. Thank you for this opportunity to share Father Kapaun's story and practice the 4 bells. It is the best. It really is. Knowing that this gets to be part of my life, and I get to share it with you. So, thank you. See you tomorrow.